live now, but it'll take a moment.
Zoom is live and warning us.
All right. Welcome everybody to Salon Spiced Cider, the fourth installment in the Gothic Funk Press virtual salon series. We're very excited to be back after a hiatus of indeterminate length. It was actually last January, so about 9 months. We've been a while, but that just means that we've brought in, the very best readers that you can have. In addition to our resident mixologist, Darren Hodis, we are joined tonight by Bob Campbell, Sylvia Hubbard, and ML Kennedy. We were originally going to be joined by poet Sarah Carson. She is unfortunately unable to join us due to wild events beyond anyone's control. But Bob has agreed to pinch hit for us, so we still have 3 wonderful readers tonight. I want to thank the Gothic Funk Nation. I want to thank all of the press of Gothic Funk Press, all of the staff. I want to thank my wonderful wife, Jessica, who will be moderating the comments. If you want to hop on and compliment somebody's impressive couture or reading presentation. Yeah, the format is that after this brief introduction, Irene will describe the themed drink of this installment. And then after that, we will have a selection from our 3 readers, and then we'll call it a night, and you will go out into the world to enjoy your spiced cider. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Irene, and we will get this show started. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Connor. I'm so excited to be here. I've participated in all the salons during the pandemic, and it has been my absolute pleasure, and love getting to hear all of your authors and poets. So this is exciting. My name is Irene Hodis. I'm reaching you from Sonoma County, California, and that is wine country. And I worked in beverages for a long time, even though I'm back in sort of literature and art right now professionally. But I'm going to take you through the recipe for spiced apple cider. Some of you probably have seen the recipe, which is on the Gothic Funk Press Facebook. It's a very, very simple recipe, very familiar. So we're starting off with apple juice. In the United States, we're one of the only countries, maybe the only one in the world, that calls a fresh pressed apple juice a cider. Everywhere else in the world, cider means fermented apples. So apples that are alcoholic and usually a bit effervescent. So there's a little bit of a distinction we have to make. So I'm doing apple juice / cider. The recipe that was included on Facebook was for 4 cups. I'm doing 2 because I'm alone here. And this is my saucepan. It fits perfectly. So I just put 2 cups of this beautiful fresh pressed by a friend of mine. We have a lot of apples here in the area, Gravenstein apples, 2 cups of that. And now I'm going to add cinnamon. Couple of cinnamon sticks. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ingredients as I dumped it in. Actually, I'm going to turn the heater on. I'm actually going to try to be a television presenter here. So the heat's on. I am heating the apple cider. Cinnamon. History about the ingredients. Cinnamon comes from Asia, and it is one of the big 4. Now the big 4, it's important. Big 4: cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, and clove. 4 spices that changed the course of about the last 1,000 years or 500 years in terms of colonialization and trade routes and exploitation of Asia and the Americas and beyond. Cinnamon was incredibly desired and very popular in Egypt by the Greeks, by the Romans, and all over medieval Europe, smothered their food in it. But it started off as being very respected, beloved for its scent, luxurious. The ancient Egyptians embalmed with it, if you can believe it. That's actually coming up with a lot of our spices here today. I could go on and on, but this began with the colonialization and the exploitation began with the Portuguese, then the Dutch, and then the English in sort of South India and in the Ceylon region, particularly, and that is current day Sri Lanka. And this is the bark of a tree. I'm going to put that in with the cider. Next ingredient I'd like to talk about is the clove. And we're all familiar with clove. These are sort of the baking spices, currently very well known as the pumpkin spice for pumpkin spice lattes over at Starbucks. I'm going to put 2 of these in because I find them to be very strong. I'm just going to put all the ingredients in before I tell you more about them. So I'm going to put in about 6, let's call it 6 of these berries, the allspice berries. They're round. They're very powerful. These are from the Caribbean, from the Americas. They're very commonly used in Jamaica. And then lastly, in terms of spices, is cardamom. Aren't these beautiful? They are very, very powerful. And cardamom is part of the ginger family and also from the southern Indian region, I believe, originally. So I'm going to put in, let's say, 4 of these. And I should remember to stir, you guys. I hope I don't light on fire or something. I have to monitor all of this. And that's it. This is kind of a mull drink. Oh no, I forgot, orange peel, very important. Yummy, delicious, orange peel. I'm gonna put 2 of these in. And I'm gonna let this heat up until it comes to a simmer. Then I'm gonna lower the heat to keep it at a simmer for about 5 minutes. So that's how you get spiced cider. It's actually a mulling technique. And mull, the word to mull is very old. It means to heat, sweeten, and flavor with spices. Just how we get mulled wine and cider. So I'm gonna let that go. Clove, one of the big 4. That little tiny, I got more here for display, cloves. This is the dried bud. So a dried bud, a dried blossom from a tree, a pine tree in the myrtle family. Comes from a very specific region in Indonesia. And again, was one of the causes of a lot of exploitation. I'm gonna leave it at that. Very powerful. I don't put a lot in. The next thing I put in was allspice, which has a fascinating story. They all have fascinating stories. People should read books on all of them. I believe they probably have. Lots of dissertations, a lot of PhD students walking around with vast quantities of information on the spices, which I will look up after this. Allspice was coined allspice by British in 1621 when they were in the islands in the Caribbean, because it reminded them of clove, pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg, the big 4. Because it resembles that. It's still a very, very important element in Jamaican cuisine, the jerk spices. And guess what? The Mayans used this to embalm as well. It was in their embalming process, just like the Egyptians used cinnamon. And they put it in, the Mayans put it in their chocolate as well. Fascinating. This is also part of it's a berry, a berry from a type of myrtle. Just like the clove is part of a myrtle family plant. Lots of connections there. So I'm going to stop talking about the spices, quite frankly, because, I didn't tell you about cardamom. One of the oldest spices, 4,000 years, guys. They also use this to embalm in Egypt. Go figure. All of these spices were very, very popular, and a lot of wars and exploitation happened because of them, but they are delicious, and we're going to be drinking them today. But I put them in apple juice. And a few words about apple cider, the alcoholic cider. I have a few examples of it here from California. They're amazing. Not that I want to promote any particular brand, but fermenting apples has a long history as well. Apples are 50 to 65 million years old, that from right after the dinosaurs, and they have a genetic diversity twice the size of ours. They've got something like 57,000 genes as opposed to our human beings, 25,000 genes, which means that there's so much diversity that if you took the seeds out of every apple and planted them, they would not resemble their parents at all. You never know what you're going to get. Our everyday apples, and I've got a local Golden Delicious, it's small because it's local and organic and picked near me. That was cultivated. Human beings hybridized and experimented and got an apple that they really liked. But in order to reproduce that same apple every single time, they grafted it. They took a branch with those apples and put it into another tree branch. That's a technique, a very old one, 2,000 plus years. And so the same apples would grow. If you wanted more of them, you took a cutting, you took an actual branch from that and stuck it onto other trees. That's how we get the apples that we like and have consistency. But if you planted their seeds, the seeds of this would not come out as a golden delicious. And so ancient peoples, they planted with the seeds. They never knew what they were going to get. And half of their apples or more came out unedible. They were bitter, they were sour, but they didn't want to waste them. And so what do? You throw them in a vat and they ferment just like grapes. A lot of people don't know that cider is not close to beer. Cider is more like wine. Cider, you can leave in one place. You don't add water. You do not cook it. It doesn't involve heat. It's natural. There's yeast in the air. It eats the sugars, and there's tannins in there. Tannins are good. That's the bitter. That's a preservative. And so that's why a lot of our ancestors drank cider instead of water. It was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. And water was dirty. You know, you could get sick, you get cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and many other things, E. coli. Ancient peoples didn't know about that, but they knew that drinking cider was safer. Children drank it. They weren't lushes, you know, they weren't alcoholics out drinking all of this stuff just because. It was a way to preserve their food, and it was a safe source of drinking water. And this is doing really well. The British have been doing this on their own. I mean, we think that the Romans and the Greeks really perfected that art of making cider. But when they showed up, the Romans, to Britain in 55 BC, they saw that the British, not the same British that are today. I don't want to talk about the Saxons. In any case, in the British Isles, they were making cider very well and very copiously 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago. And the Romans took that on and perfected it and made more and more and more. So they learned a lot from the British people in the British Isles 2,000 years ago. And with that, I think this is probably ready to be drunk. I'm going to aim my camera down. I am not a professional, but can you see that beautiful? Yeah, I think we can see it boiling there. It's delicious. I made this earlier today and it disappeared. So the thing about this recipe is that you can, and you should drink it right away, but if you put it on a simmer, like lower than a simmer, like the lowest heat that you can, if you're having a party, it will keep great. Just remember that if you're starting off with a really sweet cider, it will get sweeter because, you know, water evaporates. So I don't know if you like a less sweet, cider, you might want to taste your cider beforehand to know how sweet it is. Or you can add some water to it. That's totally legitimate because so much water is evaporating. Or you can spike it with some brandy in order to, you know, maybe reduce the sweetness, but also make it a little bit more adult and more fun. So I hope that some of you will try this. I'm going to take it off and I'm going to strain it into a cup. Watch me pour this all over my kitchen. And then I will also have a hard cider, which is what we call it here, to distinguish it from sweet cider. Oh my gosh, it's sizzling. It's sizzling. It's okay. It's going to be fine. Okay. What you should do is also reserve your cinnamon stick. And you can use that as a sort of elegant stirrer. Come on, stir. Okay, I'm going to burn myself. There we go. Cinnamon stick to swirl. And with that, I'm going to enjoy this. My house basically smells like Thanksgiving now. That's always a good thing. So happy winter, and let's get the literature on, you guys. I'm so excited to hear your work. Take it away, Connor.
All right, that was excellent. Thank you, Irene. And I just want to, I just realized that I had not read Irene's bio, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Irene Hodish, your proud virtual mixologist, has been many things. This current incarnation sees her as director of 2 film festivals and cultural events at the Sonoma County, California Jewish Community Center. She spent over 10 years in the wine industry, making, selling, and educating people about wine, as well as working in winery management. In the core of her being, she is a writer, artist, comedian, cook, traveler, wordsmith, and crossword puzzle enthusiast. During the pandemic, she writes and edits a daily film and culture newsletter and is creating a virtual international film festival, and drinks a lot of very fancy wine, craft beer, and artisanal spirits, because it's just what you do in Sonoma County. And on that last note, I I wanted to add that right now at this moment, the Sonoma County Virtual Jewish Film Festival, which Irene has helped to organize, is going on. So make sure you look that up because they've got a lot of exciting programming going on, which like this, you can experience from anywhere in the world. All right, our first reader tonight is Bob Campbell, a writer based in Flint, Michigan. His creative nonfiction and essays have appeared in Belt Magazine, Forge Literary Magazine, and Gravel Magazine. He is a contributor to Belt Publishing's Midwest Architecture Journeys, published in October 2019. Bob was a staff writer for the Flint Journal, the Lexington Herald Leader, and the Detroit Free Press. He was also an electrician at AC Sparkplug, formerly a division of General Motors, before moving into journalism. His debut novel, Motown Man, has been published by Urban Farmhouse Press and just recently released their first audio version of that book. So please welcome Bob Campbell.
Oh, thanks, Connor. Glad to be here, and thanks for calling me up and inviting me to the show tonight. So I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm going to read a little bit from Motown Man tonight. Motown Man, it's a story of Abby and Bradley. It's an interracial couple that's building their life in a fading factory town that's rife with some racial tension, on the verge of losing its identity, and generally marked with a degree of uncertainty. And there's a third character who's pretty prominent, Bradley's brother, James, who thinks their relationship is more or less a fool's errand. So in my genre tends to be literary fiction, general fiction, just to kind of give you a sense if you didn't pick up from the synopsis there. So I'm going to read a section later towards the end of the book, feeling a little festive. So James and his brother were hanging out on a Thursday night, and actually James talked his brother into hanging out while Abby is away. So with that, I will jump in. The Riviera Lounge, or the Rivy as it was known, was an after-hours joint on the city's north side, not too far from the massive Buick complex. Located on North Main Street, the Rivy's neighborhood was a bustling commercial district decades ago. That was when the street was lined with stores and shops that served the nearby neighborhoods. The area's character had changed long ago, set in motion by a complex array of circumstances. Some folks pointed to the open housing ordinance that passed narrowly by citywide referendum in the late 60s as the beginning of the end. Small businesses and shops that once anchored the area had given away to the occasional fast food restaurant franchise or rib crib, beer and wine stores with bright billboard signs screaming liquor sold here, lottery, check cashing, money orders, and WIC coupons accepted. There are also other dingy little establishments that pass themselves off as social clubs. Then there was the Riviera Lounge. Compared to other after-hour joints and social clubs, the Rivy was halfway respectable. The establishment at least tried to appear to be 100% legit, even if a beer, a shot of Hennessy, or a Seagram's wine cooler could all be bought there well after 2 a.m. when legal liquor sales ended. The owners also considered its patrons peace of mind by providing good security. The small parking lot adjacent to the club was filled with an array of shiny American-made sedans, but mostly GM. Parked near the entrance was a squat pit bull of a vehicle, a silver Geo Tracker with tinted windows and sparkling rims and narrow sidewall tires. The north and southbound sides of Main Street near the club were lined with more cars. James found an open space along Main Street just north of the club. Although the spot was a bit closer, he passed up parking on a dark street just south of the club, saying as if thinking aloud, "Fuck that. I ain't getting my ass robbed tonight by Jimmy the crackhead." And when Bradley joked he had his brother's back, James replied, "Not unless you're packing a 9, bro." Small bands of men and women made their way to the Rivy's side door entrance, where a jumbled line snaked backwards toward the parking lot like a soup line. A few were professionally attired, like they were going to work at an investment house or law firm. Others had a gaudy elegance about them, and some were plain tacky. One man wearing an open collar, eggshell colored silk shirt even attached a boutonniere on the lapel of his brown suit with white pinstripes. Most, however, were dressed somewhere along the lines of James. And no one's attire violated the no blue jeans, which applied only to men, no gym shoes, no ball caps, dress code. "How y'all brothers doing tonight?" said the briefy doorman when the brothers stepped forward. "I'm straight, dog, now," James replied. "Good," said Bradley. "Just need to pat y'all down." James held his arms outward as if soaring in midair while the doorman frisked him for weapons. Bradley was next. He too held his arms outward and feigned nonchalance about the Rivy's stop and frisk policy. The search gave him some peace of mind, knowing that anyone packing had to check his or her gun at the door. It was, however, deeply troubling on another level. So it's really come to this, he thought. "Y'all have a good night," the doorman said before repeating the routine with the next group of patrons. Bradley followed James up the narrow corridor as the music's roar and echo surged like the sound of an ocean tucked just behind a grassy knoll. Striding down the dimly lit wood panel hallway with its low drop ceiling, he felt crowded and unsure of his surroundings. He could count on 3 fingers the number of times he had been to the Riviera Lounge. It wasn't anywhere he would go with Abby for a night on the town. The place seemed like a fire trap. It reminded him of driving through the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. And although as an engineer, he trusted the science on which the tunnel was built, the trip beneath the cold, dark waters of the Detroit River still had a tendency to unsnarl his kinky hair if the traffic moved too slow, or worse, came to a halt. The sound of Stevie Wonder's "My Eyes Don't Cry" filled the club. A small team of women and 2 men were bulldozing the dance floor doing the electric slide. The line dance moved north, south, east, then west until the floor had been cleared several times over. The dancers rolled evenly back and forth and to and fro with the fluid motion of water shaken in a basin. Their movements were synchronous, though a few dancers added flair to the simple routine by improvising on the steps like Miles's fingertips on a jazz standard. A visitor from another world might have thought they had rehearsed together. "Ah, yes," James said. "The dance of the new Black consciousness movement. Black folks are dancing together again." Bradley shook his head and chuckled. "You don't quit. I'd die if I did." The brothers worked their way to the long bar where a shapely, dark-skinned sister took their drink orders. She wore her hair in a ponytail and adorned her lips with red lipstick. Her eyes had only a trace of mascara. The makeup accentuated her alluring features rather well, Bradley thought. Each ear, which had been pierced 4 times, was decorated with gold hoop earrings of descending size. The trinkets resembled a succession of fish being gobbled up by a larger one that followed. As they waited for their second tequila shots and Heinekens to arrive, James caught a glimpse of a woman seated 2 stools away from them at the bar. Her posture indicated she was available for dancing and conversation and maybe more. She had robust thighs and a head full of tiny braids that resembled a plate of black pasta. James checked her out quickly before turning to his brother on the sly to croon, "On top of spaghetti." "That's messed up, Jay," Bradley snickered after seeing what prompted the ditty. She caught Bradley looking at her and rolled her eyes with, He in turn thought, "Yeah, she's a little thick, but I could work with it." Presently, the center of the room was flat and empty. The perimeter was filled with tables and chairs, most of which were occupied with sedate patrons. The light dazzled patch of parquet tiling that made up the dance floor, the night was still fresh and energetic. A beacon of light perched upon a 4-foot tall speaker scrambled the darkness. People continued to trickle inside, and the movement through the aisles became more difficult. The music was pumping now, and a few people found themselves on the dance floor. The brothers checking out the sisters, sisters noticing the brothers. Bradley lit a cigarette, his first since he and James had been out that evening. "When did you start smoking again?" he asked. "I only do it occasionally, mostly at work." James nodded slowly, but said nothing. He resumed surveying the crowd. "All right, y'all," said the DJ from his corner perch across the room. "Let's get this party started for real." And in perfect timing, the speakers blared, "Hit it!" "Oh," James popped up off the bar rail. "That's my jam. Gotta go. Watch my drink." He made his way to a nearby table where 4 women were seated. He extended his right hand to a caramel-colored woman with large eyes and a show-stopping smile. James tilted his head twice quickly toward the dance floor with mock bashfulness. She nodded affirmatively and stood up. She was fine, Bradley thought, and the kind of woman he never had much luck with. Tall, lean, dressed in black leather slacks. Her hair looked as though she had spent all afternoon at the salon. A female version of a fade, her hairdo featured large, fuller curls on top with progressively smaller micro mini curls on the side. The driving bass lifted others from their seats as well. A female voice began to explain the obvious, that it took 2 to make things go right, as the dance floor disappeared underneath the scores of dancing feet. The spaghetti lady accepted the extended hand of a man who had led her to the dance floor. Who then led her to the dance floor. The dance court was swollen with gyrating bodies, tangled arms, and bobbing heads, all moving in rhythm. The music played on without Bradley. He instead leaned against the bar, which now had plenty of elbow room, with his Heineken and cigarette to keep him company. Earlier that evening, he joked about how he hadn't danced competitively in a while. Nowadays, his dancing was limited largely to doing a 2-step in the living room with Abby while Sarah Vaughan serenaded them with Embraceable You. But he had never been much for dance clubs anyway. He wasn't much of a dancer. It made him self-conscious to think that so many eyes might be watching him. He wondered at times whether it was his lack of real dance skills, something that had been missing in his social repertoire, that made it so difficult to meet women in such places. Watching from afar as his brother and others worked to the music, he felt a certain estrangement from the group, the way a married person might feel when they've spent too much time with their in-laws at the expense of their own family gatherings. It was funny, he thought, recalling the differences, dancing in a room full of white folks and one filled with Blacks. The expectations, that is. Black folks simply expected you to get up and move something, join the party. Slow jams were a little different, only because the women didn't want you out there embarrassing her by dancing off beat, especially if there wasn't much of a crowd on the dance floor to get lost among. But in white gatherings, he noticed some folks tended to watch him like he was an NBA star playing a pickup game at a country club. Every move he made was treated with an air of authenticity and esteem, like they thought he could really get down if he wanted to, like he was an MC Hammer in their midst. Even the one white guy at those gatherings who would swear he could jam with the best of them and was determined to prove it, gave him too much respect. So Bradley thought nothing of basking in the royal glow while it lasted. Hell, why not? Black folks knew the real deal, though. They could tell the real dancers from those like himself who could just merely or barely keep a beat and not embarrass himself. Bradley sucked on his cigarette and exhaled, rinsed his mouth with a swig of beer before chuckling at the silliness of it all. He then promised himself he'd get up and join the party on the next jam. So.
All right, thank you, Bob. That was wonderful. and always good to hear more of Motown Man. Um, Make sure you check that out, everyone. Our next reader, award-winning Detroit author and founder of Motown Writers, Sylvia Hubbard, has independently published over 50 romance suspense books in the over 20 years she's been in the literary business. As an avid blogger, podcaster, social media manager, and digital strategist, Sylvia has received literary recognition for her literacy work, plus has had 8 #1 bestsellers. She is also a speaker, literary encouragement doula, and busy mompreneur expert. So please welcome Sylvia. Sylvia, I think you're muted right now.
Well, that would explain why I was getting no reaction. Thank you for having me. I am honored to be here with Literary Greats, and thank you, Connor, so much for making me a part of this endeavor. So tonight, I will be reading from my recently released novel that released in October 7th, and it's a romance suspense called The Trouble with Gabrielle. And basically the tagline is that she's alone, pregnant, and about to be murdered. So Gabrielle has a one-night stand with a mysterious stranger, and 4 months later, she is in desperate need of money and she's pregnant. And I'm starting at chapter 3, where she has now tracked down the lover's home out in Deckerville, Michigan, where it's kind of like the thumb of Michigan nearby her, Huron, if you don't know. And she's trying to find him in order to just ask for a little bit of money in order to just get over this hump so she can go on with her life. Oliver's house was a 2-hour drive from Detroit, Michigan, and on a massive piece of land. Gabrielle looked down at the notebook open to a circle monetary amount, $30,000. That's all she would need. The gate around the area looked like it cost at least $50,000, and she didn't even want to guesstimate the monthly land upkeep, $1,000 or more easily. She wasn't familiar with the wealth expenses and didn't want to be. A long, dark Mercedes limousine passed her slowly with the darkest windows and pulled up in the driveway. There was a box at the gate's entrance, and whoever was in the car pressed a button and the gate opened. As tactical as Gabrielle was, a significant unknown factor in her plan was whether Oliver would give her what she needed. He'd be pissed as hell showing up at his home unannounced, but this pregnancy was very unplanned for her. She had begun to think Oliver had every intentions of getting her pregnant that night, but she would have never suspected he would not give her money for a second pregnancy. Albeit he was drunk all the time, Oliver was intelligent enough to wrap it up and not get just anyone pregnant. Gabrielle would ask him today instead of dancing around the subject for the money. Indeed, showing up at his door unannounced pregnant would incense him, but he would probably deny he knew her and have her escorted off the property. Alone, Oliver was a pushover with her, but she had never had the pleasure of being with him out in public. From the stories he'd told her, any personal relationships with a Black woman would not be favored in any way in the world, and he had his father's reputation to uphold. That whole scenario made him miserable, and he felt it was his obligation to abide. After sending her location to Ingrid's cell phone, she called her mother. "What's this?" Ingrid questioned. "That's where I am." "Who's this? I can't see anything on Google. It's just a field." "I need to be here, Mom, but if you don't hear from me by tonight, can you call the police?" Ingrid grunted. "Ain't nothing worth being killed, Gabby. Come home. You got responsibilities." "I'm doing this because I have responsibilities, Ingrid." She huffed because being compared to her mother always begging men for money just irritated her soul, and Gabrielle was tempted to drive back to Detroit. Still, the butterflies in her stomach were the baby's anxiousness. Putting her hand on her belly to calm herself, she said with sarcasm, "I know you don't care, but I just needed you to know where to find the body." She hung up because taking any advice from Ingrid, who only cared about herself, was just stupid. Touching the side of her face, remembering the slaps Ingrid had viciously delivered when she was young, started to upset her. Once Gabrielle received the money, she wouldn't have to deal with Ingrid anymore. She'd have enough to get back on her feet, take care of her son Charles, and adequately take care of the new baby. By next year, she'd have her job back or would be able to get any other position with just as much pay. A surgical assistant was a lucrative position, but one had to be on top of their game if they wanted to work in the field. Currently, she wasn't at the top of her game, and even her doctor had deemed her high risk. In so many words, he said she needed to sit her butt down and rest if she didn't want to lose the baby. Putting the car in drive, Gabrielle pulled up to the box and pressed the green button. I'm here to see Oliver Farnsworth, she faltered because she had never said his full name out loud. Who is this? A woman's voice sharply demanded. My name is Gabrielle Payne. What do you want? Gabrielle almost said something sarcastic. Taking a deep breath, she said, I'm looking for Oliver Farnsworth. I need to tell him something very important. There was a long silence on the other line. A moment so long, Gabrielle was about to push the green button again. You can come around the back to the service entrance, the woman came back. She glared at the box in pure frustration. Look, lady, I need to speak with Oliver. Is he here or not? There was another long pause before a man came after and said sharply, Oliver's not here, so get your trifling butt off this property. She didn't care about respecting Oliver's family at this point, but she needed to get to Oliver. I've been trying to reach him for 2 weeks. It's important I speak with him concerning a dire situation. What is your name? The man asked if she hadn't said it. Gabrielle Payne, she enunciated loudly. There was yet another moment of long silence. Laying her head vexing on the steering wheel, she was about to give up and drive away until the initial woman's voice came back on the speaker. What is your phone number? That was a strange question, but she slowly rattled it off her phone number. Another minute passed, then the gate slowly opened. Gabrielle hesitated because why was her phone number significant after everything they had just put her through? Driving up to the front of the house, she got out of a car and looked at the large 2-story 21st century palatial home. The front doors were about 50 feet from the driveway, and Gabrielle hiked herself up there as the red front doors opened. A woman dressed in black came out. Gabrielle walked closer, noting the Arabic older features were prominent along with the disdain on her face. The woman couldn't be more than 5'1", whereas Gabrielle felt she towered above the woman at her 5'5". Her dark hair, dark eyes, and small features placed her at least over 60 as she looked over circled-rimmed glasses like she couldn't believe Gabrielle's audacity of coming in the vicinity of the property. How can I help you, Gabrielle Payne? The older woman asked stiffly. It was November, and the crisp Michigan Huron Lake whipped about them briskly. Gabrielle was dressed for outside, but this woman wasn't. Yet Gabrielle knew this woman would die before she allowed a Black woman to come through the front doors as a welcome guest. I told you how you can help me. I need to speak with Oliver. So if you could call him and just let him know I'm here, I don't mind waiting in my car. The woman looked past Gabrielle at the vehicle parked in front of the home, and her face grew even more contemptuous. And you were told, Gab, that Oliver is here? Gabrielle cut her off. I've been trying to locate him for the past 2 weeks unsuccessfully, and I'm just trying to get a message to him. You can tell me the message, the woman insisted. I won't, she sneered through gritted teeth. Just get Oliver on the phone and tell him I'm here, please. Not wanting to be another minute in front of this small Arabic general, Gabrielle walked off the porch and went to sit in the vehicle. The woman hurriedly went to the doorway and called someone. Gabrielle knew it was probably to get her kicked off the property. Yes, she had lost her temper, but this woman, whoever she was, deserved something even worse. A sock in the nose, Oliver would have suggested, because he knew Gabrielle would never resort to violence. Or would you have sarcasmed them to death, Gabrielle? He always had a way to say the most ridiculous thing to make her laugh. Whomever the woman called finally came to the door. It was a man. He was taller than the older woman, but since Gabrielle was parked so darn far away from the door, she couldn't make out the features. Getting out of her car, hoping to confront the man as he walked brusquely towards her, she prepared to blurt out she was pregnant because she felt it was the only thing that would get results. Oliver would have to be angry later, but she needed to get home, and these people just needed to give her the respect of Oliver's baby mother or get ready for verbal cursing she could lay upon them. Tightening her coat and then approaching the man as he advanced on her, Gabrielle looked up into his face and announced her pregnancy until she noticed the gray, tannish eyes glaring at her. Gabrielle tripped over her own feet and fell face forward, but the man was close enough to catch her. Oliver, she cried, relieved, throwing her arms around his neck. Oh my God, Oliver, I've been trying to reach you. The man continued to glare heatedly at her and was about to say something, but she didn't want him to get a word in to yell at her. So she spoke at the same time he spoke. I'm pregnant, she announced. He snarled, I'm not Oliver. And that is it for that chapter, and I hope you enjoyed the reading.
Wow, we need to keep reading. I want to know what happens next. And for those of you who might have missed it, that is The Trouble with Gabrielle, Sylvia's latest book. Thank you so much. And our last reader for the night is M.L. Kennedy, who was born in Buffalo, New York, the land of chicken wings, Kimmelweck rolls, and Super Bowl disappointment. Currently, he lives in Chicago, a land of thick pizza, Italian beef, and rebuilding years. 100 by 100 is his third book, following his debut novella, The Mosquito Song, and his short story collection, Thanksgiving for Werewolves and Other Monstrous Tales. I'm noticing that this bio also omits two other wonderful books, Things You Leave Behind, and his most recent collection, 2-Minute Stories for Weird People, which ought to appeal to anybody tuning in here. Follow Kennedy on the avenues and streets of Hyde Park neighborhood in Chicago or on Twitter at WBXYLO. Don't actually stalk him in Chicago, just follow him on Twitter.
You can stalk me if you want. I don't go anywhere interesting. All right, so so I mostly, Things You Leave Behind is a novel. It's my only one, but for the most part, I write flash fiction, which is the ugly little brother of poetry, basically. It's very short. 100 by 100, if you can't tell from the title, is all stories of 100 words. And we're going to be reading some from 2-Minute Stories from Weird People, which is all, it's 250 stories of 250 words. So I've really branched out. So we're going to read a couple of these, enough to take up roughly 11 to 12 minutes. So let's see how many we can get done. Should be around 6. All right, the first story is called Tchotchke. The temperature dropped about 15 degrees as Jill jogged through the park. Normally, she didn't let a thing like this bother her. It just made her run faster in order to raise her body temperature and decrease her time out in the cold. But then came the snow, and then came the rain, and then the freezing rain. Jill believed this phenomenon to be known as wintry mix. She found that euphemism to be entirely misleading, as it conjured up images in her mind of a Chex Mix covered with powdered sugar. Defeated in her run, she decided to head towards the plaza. You know, the one next to the park. It has the city's worst McDonald's next to the dialysis center. Anyways, she noticed a store that she had never noticed before. She would call it a new store, except it couldn't be. It looked run down. More than that, it sold antiques. Not being particularly genre savvy, Jill went inside. Jill wandered through the halls of the antique store, passing countless bric-a-brac and tchotchkes. She happened upon a snow globe. She went to reach for it, but a sign saying, "You break it, you bout it," paused her in her tracks. Instead, she leaned closer. Inside the snow globe looked to be a perfect recreation of this terrible little strip mall. The cars out front looked modern, so it couldn't be that much of an antique. She decided to grab it for a closer look, and the store shook. So that's the first story. That one was called Tchotchke. As you can tell, these are all about 2 minutes, as the title says. I live in a city, so they might more be 90 seconds long if I'm reading quickly. So let's go to story number 2. This story is titled Any Advanced Magic. I dog-eared the page, so I have to unfold. The queen entered her secret chamber, closing the door behind her. There, she saw her reflection in an ornate frame of gold and pearl. Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all? She waited, but no response came. She repeated, this time slowly and deliberately. Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest of them all? A glowing circle grew around the outside of the mirror before it spoke. The fairest person in the land is Chet, son of Hansel the baker. He is colloquially known as Chet the albino. No, mirror, not that kind of fair. Hansel the baker is said to have the fairest prices in the kingdom for his, the mirror took a small pause before completing, sourdough bread. Lovely. Thank you. It has been a pleasure to serve. The circle around the mirror vanished. God damn it, the queen exclaimed. She took a deep breath before trying again. Magic mirror on the wall, who is the loveliest of them all? Here's what I found. The Gallery Vittorio Emanuele II is said to be the loveliest mall. It is currently 82 miles away and scheduled to be completed in 257 years. Magic mirror, who is the loveliest person in our kingdom? The mirror paused. I don't know that one. The queen sighed. Magic mirror, am I pretty? Your face is more symmetrical than average by 2 standard deviations. I would conclude the answer is yes. Good enough. All right, well, that was story number 2. We're going to jump ahead to story number 3. See if we're going in order. Actually, they don't actually have numbers in these stories. This is going to be closer to story 169, but we're not going to follow the rules too much. It would be an understatement to say that Ashley was surprised when her head fell off. But she was more surprised that it didn't seem to kill her. Ashley had slept well that night, at least she had thought so. She had been lying on her back that morning when the sun started to brighten her bedroom. Ashley went to sit up, and she felt herself sitting up. Nevertheless, she was still looking up at the ceiling. When she looked down her nose, she saw the problem. She saw her own back. She attempted to move her left arm and found that she still could. Ashley came up with the plan. She commanded her body to lay back down. It obeyed. She grabbed her head with both hands and adjusted her neck onto her shoulders. Still holding her head between her palms, she sat up. There, she thought, that did it. Ashley slowly and steadily rose to her feet, carefully keeping her back straight and walking with finishing school posture. Feeling stable now, she let go of her head and managed to hold it there for 3 unassisted steps. Well, I guess we're done with that, she said aloud to no one in particular. 2 steps later, her head rolled backwards off her shoulders and bounced face first onto the hallway floor. 20 minutes of testing, a scarf, and a roll of packing tape later, Ashley was ready for work. There, nobody even asked about her scarf. They were too distracted by her broken nose. And that was the end. That story was called Lose It. I don't know if I said that ahead of time. I was too distracted with numbers. But anyway, let's move ahead. See, I am at 6 minutes with 3 stories just about. I'm doing great. This is great, guys. All right. This story is called American Mythology, something we talk about a lot with comic book movies and professional wrestling and other things that aren't embarrassed to be what they are. So let's talk about American mythology. And with that, the story ends, the professor concluded. Are there any questions? Roger threw his hand into the air. Our human character didn't seem to pay any price for his hubris. Nope, said the professor. A good chunk of America is pro-hubris. Carrie cocked her head. Our main character doesn't want anything. Usually when people make Faustian deals, they have some sort of goal. Yes, the professor concurred. In this instance, the devil approaches our protagonist seemingly at random. Mary began. It makes it sound like the devil's back was against the wall. I guess my question is, huh? As near as I can figure out, the professor said, Either the devil has a boss who is holding his feet to the fire about his soul collection, or this song takes place close to Armageddon and it's really crunch time to bring up those numbers. Steve spoke next. I don't get it. The devil is desperate enough to challenge some yokel to an arbitrary competition with no judges and no rubric upon which to base scoring, and he immediately concedes despite playing a really cool song, whereas Johnny just started spitting out random references like a hastily written episode of The Family Guy. Pretty much, the professor agreed. There is the possibility that the golden fiddle is cursed, but this theory is contradicted by its 1993 sequel. She concluded that day's session of studies of 1970s pop music by reminding the class of their upcoming midterm on Don McLean's American Pie. And that was the end of that story. All right. It's weird not hearing people. I'm used to reading in front of a crowd, mostly at 57th Street Books in Hyde Park. If you ever go to Hyde Park, I know you're mostly Michiganders here, but if you're doing like a tour of Obama stuff and want to see the Obama kissing rock outside the old Baskin Robbins, you can go visit Michelle Obama's favorite bookstore, 57th Street Books. This story is called Scarcity. Cameron woke up at 8. He shuffled off to the bathroom, sat in the toilet, and stared at his phone until 8:15. At 8:20, he decided to make a pot of coffee. He had 11 filters left. His large can of Hill's Brothers was mostly gone now. He probably had 4 pots left. Cameron scooped the 4th to last bit of grounds into his 11th to last filter and placed it in the machine. He filled the pot with water, happy to live near the Great Lakes and have more fresh water than he could ever need to worry about. Cameron grabbed his toaster out from his lower cabinet and plugged it in. He removed the twist tie from the package and removed 2 slices of bread. 6 slices of bread remained. He slid the bread into the toaster and retrieved his butter dish from the fridge. There were only a few tablespoons left on the stick, but he had another pound in the freezer, no cause for concern. The toast popped. He buttered it and put the butter dish away. Cameron grabbed a mug from his cupboard and set it on the counter. He snatched a packet of Splenda, tore it open, and poured its contents inside. 23 Splendas remained in the box. That's enough for 23 more cups of coffee. That's about 4 pots worth. He'd have to buy more Splenda when he bought the Hills Brothers. Cameron poured the coffee into his mug. 4 cups of hot coffee remained. Cameron sat and enjoyed his coffee. 2005 Sunday mornings remained. And that was the end of that one. A little darker, maybe. I don't know. I'm always worrying. I'm one of those guys that when he plays a video game, just goes on and like collects everything and is constantly worried, I might need this later. So I guess that's probably the inspiration for that one. So let's see. I'm going to check my time. Hold on. 10 minutes. Oh, gosh. All right. So let's see. Which of these do I want to read? I'm going to pick between 2. This one is central about Western New York, so we're going to skip that because you all are Michiganders. So we're going to go ahead and do this one. It's called The Tree. It's about a tree. We'll see how it goes. Carla ran out of the living room frantically, clutching her cell phone. She searched the web in the hallway, then clicked on the phone icon when she got into the back room. It barely rang before a voice cut in. Welcome to Ghost Control. If you know your party's 3-digit extension, you can dial at any time. Para continuar en español, oprima dos. Para continuar la Polska. I don't speak Polish, so that was hard to say. Please listen for the following options. Carla's eyes moved towards the open door. She scrambled to close it, then shoved an end table to block it. For store hours and location, press 1. For directions and parking, press 2. To enroll in our Ghost Control training program, press 3. To schedule, reschedule, or modify an appointment, press 6. Carla swiped her phone to reveal the keypad, then push 6. To reschedule or modify an existing appointment, press 1 now. If this is a new appointment, press 2. Carla pushed the number 2 and listened for the beep. If you are a returning customer, you may enter your 6-digit customer code now. Otherwise, listen to. Carla held down the 0 until the phone responded. All of our representatives are assisting other customers. Your expected wait time is 7 minutes. Do you know that you can use our website, Ghost? Carla switched to the speakerphone and sat down to catch her breath. Ghost Control, thank you for holding. I'm Susan. Susan. Hold on, I'm going to transfer you over to Possessions. Please hold. And that was the end of that one. I'm at 11:55. Thank you all. You all have a good night, and I'm going to hit my mute button.
All right. So I am going to after the one about the woman whose head fell off and broke her nose. You said, let's move ahead. I'm going to assume that that was unintentional. I guess we will never know for sure. Thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you to all of our readers and to Aren for sharing your time and talents. I think it's wonderful that, nobody was really getting together for anything when these salons started. Now, it's a slight variation on that, but just the fact that, writers and readers can stay together and have a sense of community and be able to get to events like this, it's just it's very gratifying. So I really appreciate you all from taking the time out. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in. And until the next salon, everybody, take care and have a lovely Halloween.